the SCDP website. And this is a webinar, which means that we have a couple of panelists, which include myself, Pamela, and Elaine from the Environmental Caucus, and our three candidates, Brandon, Catherine, and Crystal, are on. And for everybody else that's on, we've already sent the three candidates the questions that we're going to ask tonight, so they've had some time to do their homework. I am not putting it up on a shared screen so you can actually see the candidates if they're going to be on. But before we start, I have a little comment to read. Martin Luther King recognized that social justice could not be achieved without environmental justice, including healthier living environments for underprivileged communities and universal access to clean air, water, and soil. After Martin Luther King's assassination in 1968, environmentalists were able to pass Clean Air Act of 1970, the Clean Water Act of 1972, and the Endangered Species Act, all of which had a direct effect on communities of color who are often marginalized and impacted most heavily by climate change, as we see it today in South Carolina. We, indeed, the entire world, is at an existential turning point. We, the South Carolina Democratic Party, are at a turning point of our own as we're about to vote for new leadership. Will we as Democrats rise to the environmental justice issues that are upon us? Please join us as we give each candidate 1 minute to introduce themselves. Then each candidate will be asked the same question and be given 1 minute to respond. And I'm doing this for the introduction and the first question in alphabetical order by their first name. So Brandon, you have a minute. Please introduce yourself. You have to unmute yourself, Brandon.
All right, here we go. Sorry about that. All right. So my name is Brandon Upson. I'm from Aiken, South Carolina. I now live in TGK in York County with my family. My wife, Monica, my three children who are 6, 7, and 8 years old, Cosette, Sophie, and Patrick. And, I just want to let y'all know, no, I am not a scientist. No, I do not have a PhD. But I am a person that cares about this earth because we haven't, we don't have a second one. So we got to do right by this one. And I'm running to make sure that our party is as effective and efficient as possible, that is putting the will and the needs of the people first, and it's people centric, and it's working from the bottom up and not the top down. And I'm very excited about this conversation to discuss my ideas and vision for our party and what I think our party can do in terms of our environment and protections. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you. Again,
right on time too. Our next candidate is Catherine Fleming Bruce. Catherine, you're on.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Catherine Fleming Bruce, and I am a Columbia resident and working hard to meld the two sides of what I think the party needs to be doing, the electing candidates side and the activism side. I have a background that reflects heavily both of those. I plan to meld those into my leadership. I think that policy, especially environmental policy, needs to be in the forefront of what we do and not a sideline. So we have a very active, wonderful group. We have 15 groups of caucuses. The Environmental Caucus is one of the more active groups, but we could do so much more to support them being in the forefront of environmental change. So that's one of the things that I want to be sure that we do, is to have a partnership and an allyship that's going to move policy forward. And I think that will bring folks back to the table to participate as voters and as engaged citizens. So I'm Catherine Fleming Bruce, running for SCDP Chair. Thank you so much for putting this on.
Thank you, Catherine. Crystal, you're on.
Thank you, Stuart, and I apologize. I'm having some, technical Wi-Fi issues here. But my name is Crystal Spain, and I'm running for chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. I'm running for chair because I absolutely love the South Carolina Democratic Party. I came to this party over a decade ago as a volunteer, and I have been here off and on ever since. I love working toward electing Democrats, working towards just espousing our democratic values, and I am definitely, as Brandon said, not a environmentalist. So I've definitely done my homework to answer these questions. But a part of our party's mission is to make sure that we have strong candidates, we have serious candidates, and making sure that our caucus is strong to help ensure that we have that we're supporting them and that they're on the right side of these issues. So I'm looking forward to this conversation this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first question, and we'll do the same, we're going to do the same order and then shift them around as we go on. The first question, as the statewide leader of the party, please explain how you plan to implement environmental resolutions passed by the South Carolina Democratic Party's convention, specifically those that were printed at the end of that we sent to you. So the resolution to eliminate the use of single-use plastics at Democratic Party events, the environmental justice resolution surrounding nuclear industries in South Carolina, and the resolution concerning woody biomass fuel production processes. Brandon, you're on first.
All right. So here's the thing, y'all. I was just at our state party headquarters, and the college Democrats had their convention. And, college students are always hungry. So I bought, what did I do? I bought pizza. It was the Young Democrats, the Central Midlands meeting. And I went looking for plates and utensils, and I only found disposable plates and utensils. And, even something that simple in our headquarters, following what we say we want to do. And Crystal's right. Our role and job is to win elections and fill candidates to push our agenda and our values forward. But something as simple as having, glassware and plateware at our headquarters to set the standard and implement those roles is something we can do and set the stage for. And then work with our county parties who have offices to do the same. If we are not practicing it out at our headquarters, how can we expect every county, all the other 45 counties outside of Richland, to do the same? Also, our platform is an expression of what we believe and who we are. We also should have our candidates who are running promote our platform unapologetically, because they are the best way for us to communicate our brand with the general public. If we as a party are saying one thing and then candidates are going around saying another thing, and the Republicans are defining us as another thing, Democrats and good folks across South Carolina, the voters, are going to be confused. So one, practice what we preach at the headquarters and work with our county parties to be able to do the same thing. And two, fill candidates and make sure that they are also promoting our platform and representing our brand well.
You didn't ask the other two resolutions, the one on nuclear issues and the other one. You have a couple seconds left, minutes left.
How many?
To address those issues, a couple of minutes. Candidates, stay on topic. Answer the question.
We're trying to give every candidate 3 minutes to answer these.
3 minutes. Okay. Yeah. I thought it was still like a minute.
Thank you, Elaine.
Okay.
Brandon, you want to go back to the other two?
I do, because when we're talking about the actual policy, the chairman does not set policy. You're not an elected official who is a lawmaker or works in the legislature. But what we can do is build a better relationship with our state house leadership and our Senate House members and our senators, so that we advocate. When I was the chief strategy officer for the House Minority Caucus, there was a ton of environmental legislation that came through that we needed to stop and end. I worked with Representative Shedron Williams and a few other members, Representative Gilda Kopp Hunter, to stop it in subcommittee. We have to communicate better and work better across our policy our policy infrastructure as a party to make sure that we're not just stopping legislation that's bad, but we're promoting good legislation and allowing it to work. When it comes down to, nuclear energy, there's so much that we could be doing outside of that. I work with a group right now that's with Representative Jermaine Johnson, who is doing a solar farm project right here in Richland County. I'm on board to bring that to life. We have 14 permits that I've been working on getting passed so that we can do that and do agriculture underneath those so that we can provide fresh fruits and vegetables for that community. But as a party, we can elevate great programs like that, make sure that folks know about it. And if we're talking about how do we win races, we win on issues that matter to the people, and the people care about their environment, access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and then what's happening in their backyard. I saw a couple hands go up while I was talking.
No, that's good.
Was
Thank
that
you.
follow up? Okay.
No,
I wasn't sure what the fingers meant.
No,
Yeah,
May I clarify something here just for the panelists? These are resolutions that were passed by vote by the Democratic Party at a
That's
convention.
correct.
The question really is, how are the resolutions going to be supported by you as a candidate? It's not really asking what you're doing for each issue, but for those resolutions, if they were passed by the body, how are you going to promote those that were already passed? Because we're not seeing them being promoted by leadership. It's a resolution that appears to go into a file. So that's actually the basis of the question.
I got you. Can I get 15 seconds just to respond to that?
Let's do that.
Go ahead.
15 seconds.
Go ahead.
Because we're notorious for creating things and then putting them away and collecting dust and never seeing them again. Even on our website, you have to dig and dig and dig to find these things. We should have this on the homepage at the very least. We should meet with our legislators at the beginning of the legislative session. Well, even before that, in September, before pre-filing, to make sure they know what our position is, so that if there's anything we can do to pre-file legislation that is on their agenda and they're pre-filing it, and then we can build a campaign to help push it in the next legislative cycle. We're not doing any of that right now. And because of that, I believe that's why our platform and resolutions are not known by our members. That's why our representatives and senators really don't know what we're fighting for and what we need them to fight for. And let me tell you this, when something comes up, I can't tell you how many times they had to rely on a lobbyist to explain to them what in the world was going on with the bill. It should not be that way. We should be providing that from the party to them, and that will strengthen the relationship so we can get things done.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay.
Longer than 15 seconds, but thank
No,
you,
no,
Steve. I'm
that's
sorry,
okay, but
Stuart.
it's good. And I appreciate both Pamela and Elaine coming in and clarifying it, which helps the other candidates. So Catherine, you're on.
All right.
And again,
well,
wait, and again, for all those that are on the webinar, the candidates have received the questions. So it's not like they have to remember everything that I said. They have them in writing right in front of them. So Catherine, you're on, please.
okay, good. Well, thank you so much for these 3 questions. I'm going to start with the single-use plastics, because when I was on the State House grounds with Occupy Columbia, we had a discussion, and Pam and Elaine would remember the discussions about single-use plastics at the State House grounds, because people were camping out in protest about environmental justice and income inequality. So that was a situation where we had to look at use of paper, use of plastics, Elaine even ended up taking dishes home and bringing them back in order to conform with this standard. So we have to conform our budget priorities as well as our meal priorities to say, this is going to be the strategy that we'll use to be able to use single-use plastics at every opportunity. So that is an important first step. Now, with regard to looking at these two issues and what happens to resolutions, I think what's important is that we need to have a different attitude toward what we're going to do about issues. Our current attitude and MO, if you will, is, we have caucuses. We're going to talk about things. They're going to bring us items to put in a platform. They're going to bring us resolutions, but we don't have any thinking beyond that. So my effort and my interest as a state party leader is going to be to make these issues a priority. So when we're looking at the nuclear industry resolution, we want to do that in partnership with our environmental groups in the state of South Carolina. We want to look at what is your lobby day. We don't have a lobby day right now. Some of them do, some of them don't. How can we best collaborate to bring these issues to our legislators, and how can we support them once they're doing that? So we want to do that on the state level. We also want to do that on the local level where possible. So there might be some opportunity for council members, city council members to pass ordinances which would help support this resolution. So if we have partnerships with all of our elected officials on all these levels, we can not only address the bringing forward the resolution into policy action, we could do the same with the biomass. So some of it would be work that can be done, ordinances passed, legislation passed at the state level, at the local level. And we can also get our membership to participate and join in by attending some of these hearings, doing some testimony, and so forth. So we want to have a situation where, and a strategy where we are engaged in partnership with these other agencies that are focused on these issues, with the end point of making sure that we see legislative change and policy change. And I think that's a thing that the Democratic Party can do that right now it's relegating to maybe a lobbyist or, a particular person. And we're not all talking to each other and we don't know what's going on.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Crystal, you're on, please.
Thank you, Stuart. So for the first one about the single-use plastic, this is such an important issue, and this is solvable. Single-use plastics are a hazard to public health, to the wildlife, and made from products that promote climate change. And we have great alternatives. So as chair, I will ensure that no single-use plastics are used at any South Carolina Democratic Party events. I'll work with the county parties to help them ensure that no single-use plastics are used at their events either. And I'll support the use of eco-friendly reusable alternatives, as well as like the information that we're going to, the efforts that you all do, the Environmental Caucus, around these issues. As it relates to the second resolution, I think it's the environmental justice resolution surrounding nuclear industries in South Carolina. I know that South Carolinians provide dedicated service to our nation at the Savannah River site, for example, and they use potentially dangerous materials. So as we support them, we must ensure their continued safety. And as the resolution rightly emphasizes, we must also support the communities that we are the communities that are at risk. Excuse me, if something were to go wrong. So I'll work with our elected officials, all the way from Jim Clyburn over to hopefully someone the Democrat who can defeat Joe Wilson in 2024. down to the local office holders to develop policies and disperse funds based on sound science, while ensuring that young South Carolinians are given the opportunities to participate in this important work. And the final resolution that I had on my sheet was about the woody biomass fuel production, which I was not that familiar processes. These are harmful to the environment on multiple fronts. They're harmful to our climate, harmful to the health, and harmful to our state's natural beauty. We do have a beautiful state. I can attest to that as I've been traveling all around this state over the past few weeks. I'll work with our elected officials to advocate for the important measures advocated by the resolution. And I'll also work with the Environmental Caucus and other activists to focus on the opportunities we have available to us to move the state toward a clean energy economy with a family sustaining jobs and more affordable energy and clean air and water, including through the grants and direct payments available under the President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal.
And just
Next,
clarify and just correct the situation that it's not potentially harmful. These nuclear facilities produce nuclear waste that is piling up in our state. And also there are low income, predominantly Black populations of people surrounding these facilities who are definitely, their health is impacted, and they're in a vulnerable, very difficult to find their voice in speaking out. So that is a situation. And by the way, we should, as Democrats, go to higher ground to really protect people, lower communities around these big corporate polluting industries. Thank you.
okay. We're going to move on to the next question, and we're going to probably try to keep this 2 minutes or less for each person. And Crystal, you go first. Keeping in mind that nuclear energy produces long-lived, highly toxic waste for which there is no safe disposal site, will you define your understanding of what clean energy is? And would you consider supporting the introduction of legislation to require South Carolina power suppliers to increase renewables? So Crystal, you first.
Thank you, Stuart. So the Democratic Party is a big tent party, right? With a wide range of opinions on many issues. I do not believe it is the role of the party to take sides on issues where there are many well-respected voices in our party on different sides. Nuclear energy is one of those issues. So if I'm elected chair, I will ensure that our voices, your voices, are heard, and I'll promote a science-based good faith dialogue to strive for understanding that will inform the policies Democrats need so we can advance them. If I'm successful as a party chair, we will win elections, and we'll be responsible, and we'll make those difficult decisions.
Thank you. Catherine? You have to unmute yourself, Catherine.
All right,
Sorry.
thanks so much. We're looking at a definition of clean energy as not producing any kind of pollution, not producing anything that is going to create CO2, greenhouse gases, pollute our water and our air, make our water undrinkable, create biohazard. So that means first a dialogue with our Democratic folks to make sure everybody is on the same page and to move folks toward the same page. And then to work to make sure that we're moving in a policy direction of clean energy. So that means that some of the systems that we have in place right now with nuclear energy, we want to leave those systems behind and begin a process, especially if we're trying to be connected to United Nations goals. We want to move into a new direction and wind these old systems down and move into clean energy systems. So that is the direction that I would go in as chair, and to do that in partnership with our state leaders, our advocacy groups, and our international groups like the UN. That's making sure that we know that we are in a crisis.
Thank you, Catherine. Brandon, please.
I'm sorry. I should probably just keep myself unmuted and just be quiet on my side because it takes too long for me to unmute myself. But
You're okay.
yeah, but here's the thing. I don't believe that we should take a neutral stand when it comes to the health, welfare, and well-being of our children, our future, and our planet. When we say that we want to, we don't want to upset anyone, then who are we? What do we stand for if we're going to take that position? And I don't know. I'm not reading from a paper here because I wanted to make sure that y'all know exactly how I feel about each one of these and not giving you a rehearsed or a pre-written response, because I think that is disingenuous. But what I want to say is that when it comes to nuclear waste, I grew up in Aiken, South Carolina. My grandfather worked at Westinghouse. My uncle worked at SRS. My wife's dad now works at SRS. And I understand how big of an environmental threat that site is and how big of a threat to the lives around it is. Not only did minority communities get pushed out of their land and their farming land for the building of this site, but now it is surrounded by low-income communities that would be impacted if a disaster happened. You know, we can talk about the debacle of the failed nuclear power plant right up here in Fairfield. You know, we can look at examples of how waste impacts communities. I talked to Harold Mitchell on a weekly basis about the brownfields and the work that he's doing with Regenesis and environmental justice, and how our communities are, and when I say our, I don't just mean Black, but I mean poor folks, how poor communities are negatively impacted by these dirty energy sources, when we have so many resources and advances in technology to turn this around. As the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, I am not going to have a 1 foot in, 1 foot out approach. If our leadership will not take a position, how can we expect our candidates to take a position? And if our candidates don't take a position, how can we expect them to win? We have to stop being lukewarm, and we have to have folks who are courageous enough to speak the truth no matter who hears it. That is running and serving as a Democrat. We have to brand ourselves and let people know who we are and what we stand for. If we're wishy-washy, they're going to always be confused, and we're going to continue to lose over and over and over again. So, you know, that is my overview of that. And I hope it answers your question, but I just want to make sure that this is framed so folks understand what's at risk if we as a party don't stand firm on these environmental policies that our internal experts, which is this caucus, have moved us in the direction of. And I just thank you again for the opportunity to speak, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you. Okay, next one deals with climate change, and I have a little bit of an introductory paragraphs. Most negatively affected by climate change induced excessive heat and flooding are coastal plain residents living in mobile homes and Section 8 housing. To make matters worse, there is little help for residents where the FEMA maps do not indicate that these areas are now flooding zones. In cities such as Columbia and Charleston, heat island effects are worsening as the result of intense development without regard to either energy efficiency requirements and retention of mature tree canopy. Several Democrats were involved in the heat map study in the Columbia area led by USC. Also, there was another group in Charleston. The Columbia City Council ignored the results. Heat increasing cement replacing tree canopy, which has decreased the quality of life in our state capital. Heat is dangerous and unaffordable for low-income residents whose electric bills for air conditioning are too high to pay. In the meantime, the use of fossil fuels continues and increases unabated. Clean, renewable energy can be rapidly ramped up right now, and it's vital to our survival. There are many effective options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as we have learned from and through scientific research. Current nuclear power plants are about 50 years old and are in need of constant expensive repairs. New modular nuclear plants not ready to go yet will cost even more and produce radioactive waste in addition to the existing nuclear waste for which there is no management. Money to keep the nuclear power on life support, diverse funds needed for accelerating energy efficiencies and existing renewables. We will have Catherine go first, and the three parts to the questions will be, how will you lead the South Carolina Democratic Party to take actions to minimize and mitigate climate change across the state? Will you defend South Carolina's current renewable tax credits? If so, how? And what legislation related to climate change do you think the Democrats should develop and pass? So, Catherine, you're on.
Well, I'm going to start with the idea that the party needs to expand the things that it focuses on. So we talk about the party's main responsibility being electing new candidates and making sure that we have an interaction with the party and with the DNC and so forth. We need an expansion of that idea, which will include taking the lead on some of these issues. So one of the things that we have to do, I think, if we want to mitigate climate issues, and many of us remember the flooding that happened not too long ago that was so destructive. We're seeing increases in these climate incidents. So we have to take the lead, and doing that with our elected leaders. We have to do that with President Biden and make sure first that our public understands and can be strong advocates for these policy positions. So we want to do that, and we can do it based on the need that people see in their own community. Communities like Walterboro County that had such destruction with one of the hurricanes a number of years ago. And several hurricanes that have been devastating. So people can tell those stories about what's happening in their community and how we need to work together, Democratic Party, elected officials, candidates, and advocates to make sure that we're on one message and that we're working toward policy change and working toward lifestyle changes, because some lifestyle changes have to be made in order to make climate change happen. I will defend and make sure we have renewable tax credits, although renewable means that you have the resources to make certain purchases in order to get a tax benefit. So those folks who don't have that, we want to be able to support them as well. And there have been several grant opportunities that I worked with the environmental and the rural caucuses on that would give those opportunities for an increased number of South Carolinians to be able to participate in climate change activities. And the legislation specific to South Carolina, I think we have to make sure, first of all, we have ethics reform, because this is why we got into the debacle with the Fairfield County plant, is because of the unethical behavior and relationship between agencies and legislators, which led to the public corruption trial that we had. So we need to, if we are going to have legislation, we're going to have to make sure that we have the ethics reform that's going to distance legislators from these money organizations, from the dark money organizations that will make sure that we do not end up with the right legislation. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Brandon, you're on.
Yep. So I want to go back to grounding this in the role of the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. You know, our party has two functions, two responsibilities. One is to win races, and two is to advocate on behalf of South Carolina Democrats to the DNC. The first one is very important because it has real life implications on the standard of living, the quality of life, the quality of place, and the future of our state as we know it. So if we're not winning races and getting Democrats elected who will be champions of all of the issues we're bringing up in this forum tonight, then we're losing the battle beyond the race. And I wanted to say that because, yes, we have to focus on the issues. And I believe that the issues ground us in creating the infrastructure we need to be able to win races. Let's not make any mistake about it. You don't win races just by having a good, catchy soundbite or an attractive candidate. You win races by speaking to the issues that people care about. So I want to make sure that we're recruiting candidates that are champions of progressive climate policies, and also, we'll take this, everything we're talking about, and running with it. Yeah, as some of you know, I've worked with Tom Steyer. I worked with Tom Steyer for about 3 years, including the couple months that he ran for president of the United States. But I got involved on a number of his initiatives beyond need to impeach. I was also working with him with Next Gen, and we talked specifically about climate change and how that impacted our world. And young voters, young people who were just becoming old enough to vote, were flocking to us because we were speaking about the issues that they cared about. We're not energizing our young base of voters in South Carolina. And I'm not talking about using these issues to pander to anyone. I'm talking about letting people know that as a Democrat in South Carolina, I see you, I hear you, I understand where you're coming from, and I want to work with you to do something about it. When I talk about building a grassroots infrastructure for our party so that we can engage people 365 days a year, I'm not talking about just doing that just so we can go out here and, take back the state house, because at the end of the day, our priority is the people. And the reason why environmental injustices like what we're talking about now, and even environmental racism happens, is because profits are put over the well-being of people, and the Republicans will place their party above the best interests of their people, even if those people include their base of voters. And we cannot go down the same road. When our voters see that we're putting them first, we will no longer see the lowest turnout in a generation for the base of our party. So coming back to this, and again, y'all, I'm not a PhD or a scientist, but I understand, my strengths and weaknesses, and I will work to strengthen our caucuses, especially the environmental caucuses. So, am I over my time?
You're
trying to stop me?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
That's
Okay.
right.
So,
I will stop after the next question because I think we need to put some time limits on. But finish up,
okay.
Brandon. Finish up.
The last thought here is, if our caucuses aren't empowered to do what y'all are doing tonight times 100, we're wasting our time. We are literally wasting our time. The brain power that's in this environmental caucus, people pay for, and you are volunteering your time, your energy, your treasures, and your resources into investing in this party. And the best thing we can do as a party is make sure that is not falling on deaf ears or being put in a document that's collecting dust. And I want to work with y'all so that we can turn that around and stop being a social club and being an active utility, an active organization that's getting things done.
Thank you. Crystal, you're on.
Thank you, Stuart. Just also want to reiterate about just the role of the party and how important it is for us to recruit, not just recruit good candidates, but train serious candidates so that they're on the right side of the issues. Just like the homework that I've had to do to prepare myself for this caucus forum, it's important that we're also making sure that our candidates know about the issues as well, because climate change threatens our way of life here in South Carolina, and it threatens public health. It disproportionately harms Black and brown communities specifically. So, excuse me, as the party chair, my role is to support Democratic legislators and candidates, right? So all these bills and legislations that we need to get behind, that we need to champion, we can't do that if we're not electing Democrats. And that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that we're elected Democrats up and down the ballot, and that they're prepared to have these conversations, that they're prepared to advocate for legislations that are going to help our voters, because our voters most times are the lower income voters. They are the Black and brown voters, and they are the ones that are closest to these pains, but they're also the ones that benefit from working at some of these plants, right? And so it also folds back to healthcare, right? Having access to the healthcare that they need, because they are going to be subjected to illnesses by being in places like Westinghouse and Savannah Riverside. But as the party chair, I'm going to work to bring the resources to bear that we need to have to train candidates up and down the ballot, and that they're prepared to advocate on the issues that matter to South Carolina Democrats.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to really keep everyone to 2 minutes or less for the next couple of questions. We're going to skip to health right now. And the order will be Brandon, Crystal, and Catherine. The late Reverend and South Carolina House Representative Joe Neal introduced the Environmental Bill of Rights as a constitutional amendment that guaranteed clean air, water, and land for all South Carolinians. How will you promote legislation that would do the same, and harmful PFAS, aka forever chemicals, in South Carolina drinking water sources exceed the standards met by the EPA? Set by the EPA. How will you support the Biden administration to clean up our water? And again, we're doing Brandon, Crystal, and Catherine. So Brandon, you're on.
Yes, sir. So here's the thing, y'all. I was in 2019, all the way through the pandemic, I was working closely with Deanna Miller-Berry in Denmark, South Carolina. And working with her, I not only helped distribute over 1,300 cases of water for that community in a time when they had a drinking water catastrophe. You know, I believe that if we go around this state and actually test the water, we will find that South Carolina has communities that make Flint, Michigan look like child's play. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to a young mom, she was in her 20s, and she came to me with so much guilt in her eyes because she felt that she had made her child sick. Because what she was doing, she was fixing her daughter's formula with water out of the tap. And now going back and forth to doctor's visits, she blamed herself. In a developed world, in a developed country, in the state of South Carolina, no one should have to have that story. And as the Democratic Party, you know, I believe that sunlight is the best tool that we have in this situation, because it wasn't until the international or national cameras came to Denmark during that presidential cycle that we saw movement. Just like in Hampton County, where they had that burning trash heap that was putting arsenic in the air, and young people was developing asthma. And then Politico and the New York Times came down to report about it. And weeks later, after years of this thing burning, it was removed when it could have been removed in the first place. As a party, we can expose these situations to the sunlight that they deserve, even when our environmental agencies of the state are not doing their job. And when we work with champions, you know, I'm glad to have the support of Gilda Kopp-Hunter and Wilma Neal. When we work with them, we can invest in water infrastructure. both in drinking water, stormwater, sewer management, so that this isn't a perpetual situation that is not being solved. We have a larger responsibility here to our people. And when we put them first and we fight for on the issues that impact them the most, then they will start voting for us and our candidates. But this is a huge issue, drinking water, that needs to be addressed in a real way.
Thank you, Brandon. Crystal, you're on.
Thank you, Stuart. As far as the first part of the question about the late Representative Neal, and the clean air and the clean water and the land, all that stuff, like that's the foundation, like clean water, clean land, clean air, that's the foundation of a healthy life. And it should be fundamental to human rights that are guaranteed for generations to come. So as chair, I want to work with our elected officials, picking up the torch from the late Representative Neal, to ensure that we're taking every measurable possible to ensure that South Carolinians can rest assured that clean water is in their taps, right? Brandon brings up the Denmark water crisis that I think ended up being a big campaign issue during the 2020 presidential cycle. Lots of presidential candidates took water down there because of that crisis. And in 2022, we shouldn't be dealing with that type of issue. That should just be fundamental that you have access to clean water. But as chair, I'll be eager to work with the Environmental Caucus to support issues like clean water and even the issues with our president on a national level.
Thank you. Catherine.
Well, I will go back to the idea that what is the chair's role? I think the chair, especially in the next couple of years, will have the opportunity to bring light and bring pressure on these issues. And we can also work in a more concerted way with our elected officials to make sure that we get some legislation moving. In addition, the president has done a number of things that I believe, if our local, county, and state folks implement those, are going to make a great difference. So he has talked about rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. He's talked about making sure that there are union jobs to support clean energy. And there's also infrastructure money that has been invested in South Carolina to provide grant opportunities, to provide other ways to address these issues. Now, whether that money is being spent in that way by those elected officials at the state and local level is another matter. So I believe we definitely need to be in the lead, be in the forefront, and be in partnership as well with those organizations that are putting pressure on local and state elected officials to make sure that legislation is passed, make sure that the funds that are given to us by the president's administration are spent to clean up the water and clean up the air, and that we put a higher priority on making sure that DHEC and these other agencies are doing the necessary job in addressing the forever chemicals issues. So let's not do anything weak in terms of what we can do in a chair's role to spotlight these issues, to bring pressure, to make sure that legislators that are putting the bills forward are getting the support they need, and that we help generate enough political will to be able to change these things. So if we're doing that in partnership with these groups, I think that there will be more faith in the Democratic Party to be able to make those changes, and then people will come back to the polls. They will come back to vote for us, but they need to see us doing the work, and we can do it in partnership with groups like Sierra Club and other organizations to make that work.
Now,
Thank you, Catherine.
Stuart, I just
Daniel.
want to jump in. This was a question I had really formulated. And I just want a point of clarity. I actually thought all of the comments were very intense and thoughtful, and I really truly appreciate them. But the basis of this question was that South Carolina has a legacy
Mhm.
of inviting big corporate polluters. Democrats and Republicans both have brought in these big polluters of all kinds. Come on in, jobs, jobs, jobs. And they prey on low income communities who are desperate for jobs because they don't see hardly any other way out of their situation or any opportunities for clean jobs. And that is really the basis of this. And my good friend, Pastor Joe, he had suggested changing the constitution of our state. That would be a game changer as far as how DHEC looks at, and our entire state, all of our elected officials look at big corporate polluters coming in. So I should have added a little more clarity to that, but I just wanted to expound. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Our last question, and then we're going to give everybody after the question 1 minute to close. But this is environmental, social, and governance, ESG. Investing refers to a set of standards for an organization's or company's behavior and policies used by socially and environmentally conscious investors to screen potential investments with respect to the communities which surround their ventures. Also going back to what Elaine just said, environmental justice refers to the protection of low wealth communities, most frequently of color, from the potential and real damages of environmental degradation. I think every existing coal power plant in South Carolina is in the area of poverty and usually a community of color. These communities, and those are the children who are getting asthma, these communities are often targeted for having polluting industries and landfills and dump sites. How would your leadership of the South Carolina Democratic Party use ESG and EJ principles, and we mailed you all a set of the EJ principles, to safeguard the environment, including in platform planks? And we have Catherine going first.
Okay, I think that I would start as chair in using these lenses by starting with ethics reform. So ethics reform is a good place to look at governance and to look at the relationship between lawmakers and lobbyists and agencies and corporations to make sure there's enough separation between those entities and that there's enough transparency about what they are doing, that they're being held accountable, and that we don't end up with the kind of debacle that we had in Fairfield County, because folks are being paid off with dark money to pass these bills. So that's a first place to start, is to make changes in the ethics laws that we have in our state right now. The second is we want to make sure that we have a understanding of environmental justice and our proper governance issues with our elected officials, with the people who come on and with the people who are already on board. So we need to make sure that they embrace those and encourage them to do so. Finally, I think that the results in policy show us if we're going in the right direction. So if we are able to reduce the amount of dump sites, pollution, if we're able to bring in high standards that people use to make the decisions about what kind of environmental agency is coming in, what kind of corporation is coming in, what work they're doing, how we protect our low-income people, and how we make sure that they're at the table when these decisions are being made to bring these corporations into the communities. So if we are setting that standard and encouraging our folks to, our Democrats, the people who wear the blue and asking people to vote blue, if we are doing that standard and talking about making a change and then people seeing that change happen, I think we will be doing the proper work. And I think people will respond to that with trust and increased votes for Democrats.
Thank you, Catherine. Crystal, you're on.
So South Carolinians are good people. We support our neighbors. We support communities across the greater state. Excuse me. And we all want to do well financially. I know I do, but not at the expense of our fellow South Carolinians or any others. So the ESG and the EJ principles are important considerations for any organization. And in most cases, I believe that there are also in the organization's best long-term financial interests. So we must prioritize them in the organizations we are a part of and must work with our fellow South Carolinians and fellow Americans to make them the norm, not the exceptions. So I look forward to working with the party members to incorporate these principles in our party platform and to building support for them so that we can win elections and move our state in the right direction. And yes, those are my notes, because someone sends me questions, I want to take my time to give the best answer.
Thank you, Crystal. Brandon, you're on.
Yeah, good answer, Crystal. So here's the thing, y'all. We cannot be walking mouthpieces as a Democratic Party. We have to show people what we believe in. And I believe that in these EJ principles, and I agree with Ms. Catherine 110% on the ethics reform, because I've worked at that state house for a year. And I know what happens in that relationship between those lawyers, particularly lawyers at that state house, and the selection of judges and relationship with these lobbyists, and how much information the lobbyists give to folks as they're crafting and passing legislation that even some of the legislators don't understand what they're passing when it comes through. And it has long-term implications on our community, whether it was intended or unintended. Now, I just left Fort Lawn, South Carolina, where due to my job, where I make money, looking at a property that we had to turn down. It had 3 7-acre ponds in the back of it. All of those ponds were unusable because of the amount of coal ash that were in the ponds. And the folks that were selling the property are trying to keep it under wraps so the surrounding residential neighborhoods don't find out how much coal ash are in these ponds. Now imagine what type of situation would occur if that toxic chemical got into the drinking water there in Fort Lawn. County council members know about this. They're saying nothing. Town council members know about this. They're saying nothing. As a party, we have to hold them accountable and bring light to it. In addition to that, we know the companies that are making money off of using up our groundwater, polluting our groundwater and our air, and yet we're still taking their donations and not saying anything about it. We have to stop that. We have to be the standard bearer if we're going to hold people to a standard. As the leader of this party, I want to make sure that I move in a way and position our state party in a way that we move unapologetically, we stand on our principles, and we're not afraid to call it out or hold people accountable. Again, if we continue to do business as usual, we might as well be a social club that has mixers and meetings and shake hands and kiss babies and go to the next meeting and mixer, because we don't deserve to do anything else. But if we're going to be the Democratic Party, we're going to have to work to get things done. We're going to have to ruffle a few feathers and call a few organizations and corporations out and hold them to account for what they're doing. But we have to be the example, and we can't be afraid to do that.
Thank you, Brandon. We're going to provide each person 1 minute, and I'm going to time you on the 1 minute. But before we do that, I want to thank our 3 candidates. I want to thank Elaine and Pamela for helping to develop the questions and to serving as our also panelists tonight. And I'd like to thank the 50 some odd people that joined us for this. Stuart has a message as the chair of this environmental caucus. And for those of you who are at the February executive committee meeting, you heard it. As the new chair, and I'm not asking you to answer the question tonight, how are you going to use the caucuses? How are you going to use the expertise of individuals, not Stuart, people like Elaine and Pamela, who really are experts in the environment? How are you going to use us and rely on us and talk to us and get us involved with our legislators? So that's something to keep in mind. But now 1 minute each. Crystal, you're going first as just to finalize and say goodnight or whatever you want to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you, Pamela, for this. Thank you for the questions. As I said, when someone sends me questions, I do my due diligence to read them and to respond to them. I could stand here and just say whatever, but I definitely want to address the questions as they were laid out to me. I'm excited about this race. We're about 11 days out. I'm excited about the possibility of being elected chair so that we can do the work of protecting our environment, so that we can stand on what we believe in. And that doesn't always mean tearing each other down, because the Republicans have a supermajority at the state house. So we can definitely take the fight to the real enemy, and those are the Republicans, the people who can actually make things happen because they have the power. And I'm waiting, and I'm excited about the possibility of taking it to them. And thank y'all so much for putting this together.
Thank you. Brandon? You're muted, Brandon. You gotta
Yeah,
unmute.
I know. Every time I try to do it, it takes a second. Okay. So first off, I just want to thank the Environmental Caucus and all of the caucus leaders who are on here. I'm pretty sure out of the 50 attendees, we have members of our 15 caucuses. And let me tell you, our caucuses, and I know as a caucus chair, we are the strength of our party's ability to bring new people into our party. And because we advocate for issues, we have an intimate relationship with the residents and the voters of South Carolina. And we can engage them in ways that our campaigns and even our standard county parties can't, because they're broader, they're bigger, and we're more focused. I want to make sure that we strengthen our caucuses. I want to make sure that we bring folks in and we continue to move forward. And last thing I would say, there's a clear choice in this race. We can have change, or we can have more of the same. More of the same as a social club, and the change is everything that I described tonight. And I hope that I can get your support and your vote on April 29th to be the next chair of this great party that I love. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Brandon. Catherine? Unmute yourself, Catherine.
Okay. We should be good at this by now. You know, we've been doing it for 3
Push
years.
the right button. Okay.
Well, I want to start by thanking you, Stuart and Pamela and Elaine. You know, we've all been doing this kind of work for so many years. I want you to know that you all will have a friend and an ally in me as a chair, as someone who's known as an activist who've been working in this area, in the area of activism for many years with so many organizations, green organizations, Black Voters Matter, women's rights, and all of them are intersectional. A lot of these issues intersect across communities, across gender, across income. And so we need to be able to bring those issues and the caucuses together. We need to build that focus. We need to let the South Carolina public know and the nation know, as they're watching us, that these are the issues that we hold dear and that we're going to fight for and invest in and support. And that's how we bring people back to voting for us. So I'm asking you to consider voting for me, Catherine Fleming Bruce, for the chair of this party. If you do, we will see that all of the issues that you talk about are going to be on the front burner. They're not going to be on the sides. And all of our elected officials and our candidates will come along with us in that fight with you. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about that opportunity to do that groundbreaking work in partnership and allyship. And all of you out there, thank you for joining us. I'd also like to thank the library because that's where I am right now. so they gave me room to be in so that we could do this work. So I thank all of the folks who support public efforts for change, and the Democratic Party has a chance to be at the forefront. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Brandon. And people continue to ask me, why do I do this? And my answer is very simple. I have 3 grandchildren. And with that, everyone, again, thanks.